Welcome back. In this video, we are going to implement what is called authorization. So we have done the authentication part of it, and authentication simply means that allowing a user, or when a user is able to log in into your application, right? That is called authentication. So if you look at our API and you go to users and this one, I can log in and then the application will generate a token for me. So let's log in here and let's see that there we go. I have logged in here. So how can we authorize this user to access a certain endpoint in our application? If you look at the final one, we have two users, one, the normal login user, and an admin. So here, if you log in, then we can go ahead and restrict some resources that can be accessible by some users. That's what's called authorization. So if you look at the final project here, I've logged in. If I check my profile, I think I'm not an admin, right? So when I click on dashboard, I think I'm an admin. This is an admin account, yeah. So let me log out. And then let me log in as Joe, which is not an admin account, like that. And let's try to log in and see. Okay, I've logged in. And when I try to click on dashboard, you see that 404, you are not an admin. This is what you call authorization, right? Because authenticated, I'm able to log in, but authorization means that allowing a user to access certain endpoint or resources in your application. So how can we tell our application that, hey, application, this user is an admin, so allow him to do this or do that? But unlucky for us, HTTP servers are stateless. Simply means that when you log in here, it doesn't remember us again or anymore. It doesn't know us. So to able to tell this server that we have been logged in and if authorized, you need to grab this token. And this is what we call token-based authentication. We're going to grab this token and pass as a header anytime you're making requests, right? In the header, we will check if this token exists. And if it exists, we can decode this token and get back the actual user, right? But actually, because remember, when we are decoding, when we are signing this token, we use an ID of this user for MongoDB. So behind the scene, this token contains a user, but it has been decoded. It's only the PC that knows who this person is. So how can we take this token, decode it, and get the actual user? That is the purpose for this video. So in this video, we're going to implement what is called authorization, and we're going to restrict some certain points to be accessible to certain users. So let's go ahead and do that. So inside the project here, inside the server, we're going to create another middleware called auth, right? So middlewares, we have two middlewares here, token, and then the error. So let's create one more file here, and let's call this one auth middleware. And we can create another middleware for admin only or for students only, depending on how your application business logic is. So, all right. So first thing first, let's handle some errors. So because we have the package, it's going to be pretty simple by using const express async handler. So if you didn't watch my previous video about error handling, express async handler, and then let's require the package like that. You can go ahead and look at error handling. So there's nothing much going on. What you're doing is that you're going to wrap our function inside that, and if in case there's any error, we can catch it and display to the user. As simple as that. Okay, so here, because this middleware is going to check one, if the request the user is making contains the token that the person has logged in with, right? Anytime we want to make a request, our server will check again and again before you're allowed to access a certain endpoint. Cool. So because of that, let's bring in JWT, because here you want to decode the token. Okay, that is it. And here too, we need the user model, because you want to know which user is being logged in, right? And let's require it here, const user equal to required, and then I think one step model and then user, like that. So here comes the logic. Now let's create our function to check. Const of middleware. Let's call this one of middleware. And guys, please pay attention to what you're gonna do here, because I'll take my time to explain. If you don't familiar with it or know how this kind of function works, sometimes it looks something scary, but I'm going to take my time and explain to you as possible as I can. So here, let's make use of the express async handler, right? In case there be any error, we're going to catch it. And then in here, we're going to pass in our middleware function. And remember, it takes three things, right? Rec, response, and then next. But because I want to make use of await, I want to mark my function as an async, and this is arrow function or fat arrow, and then like that. So in here, first of all, let's grab the token from the header, right? So let's assign a variable called token here, and let's default as undefined for now, and we're going to add or update this variable as you move on. So next step is that first of all, we need to check, right, if there is token, right? So first, let's check it out. So first, let's say if on the regs, for now, let's do something like this one, okay, and then else here. Don't worry about it. It's for conditional checking. We're going to check something here. So here, if on the request, so anytime we make any request on the request object, we have what is called headers, right? So on the request header, if you doubt, let's go to one of the controllers and let me show you where I'm getting the headers from. So let's go to income. So let's fetch all income, and here let's try to console.log reg.headers, and let's check it out. So for income, let's go to the income one, and I think it's here. Fetch all income here and send the request, and let's see the console what we have. There we go. You see, we have some content type and then user agent and some things on it, and we're going to add our own property to it, and here we have what is called authorization on that. Okay, so here let's go to off middleware, and here on the reg.headers, if there is a property called authorization, right, I'm using optional chaining to make sure that I avoid using AND operator, right? For example, it goes like this: if there is request and the end something like this, and reg.headers and reg.authorization. That's why I'm using the optional chaining as that. So on the headers, if there's a property called authorization, right, authorization, then on authorization, we are going to grab something that starts with this JavaScript, okay, that start with what? We are going to use bearer token, right? So here, if we start with bearer, don't worry, we are going to explain to you, test to you where you are getting this bearer from inside the Postman. If there is something of that, then it means there is a token. Therefore, let's reassign the token equal to reg.headers.authorization, and then here we want to grab the token, right? We need to split it out. So don't worry, we want to split by space here. Make sure it's bring space here, otherwise you're gonna get an error, and you want the second index. The reason being that inside our Postman here, because we're using bearer authorization, this is how it goes. So assuming that fetching all income is protected unless you are logging, and before we can check whether if logging, if I'm making the request, this is how we're gonna do, right? On the headers, right? And then you pass what is called, let me come here, called authorization, right? You pass what you call authorization, something like this. And then here you provide bearer here and some value. So this value is a token. So with this being in place, this is how we are doing it. When this request comes in, the main purpose is to grab this token. That's all what you're doing. This logic means, right? So if you send this request, now we have one property called authorization. That's where we are grabbing it here. And then we are going to check if it starts with bearer. This is it. And then grab the token. And this is an object. If you split it, you're going to get first index, and second index, the 0 and 1. That's why we are grabbing the 1 here. So now this one represents the token. Okay, so now inside here, now you're going to make some try and catch, right? So inside here, let's try and catch, because I'm going to talk to MongoDB as well. Try and catch here. So first, inside the try, if there is token, right? If there is token, then we are going to decode the user, because we have the token now. And remember, this token represents the user, because you use the ID. If you check it out here, for the generate token, we use the ID of the user to assign it. So now you want to get it back and find the user in the DB, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So now, if there is token, then let's assign the results coming back as decoded user is equal to, now that JWT comes in here, right? So JWT.verify, right? It's a method on that. Verify what? To verify, you need the key, the token and the key. So here you provide a token like that, and then the key, and the key is from where? Process.env.jwt key, and that is it. So with this, now we get back the user decoded. So now, before we come back to this, let's export this function, module.export, let's call this one of middleware. And now, how can we pass this as a middleware? And remember, okay, let's try to console log the decoded user. Something like console.log decoded user. Okay, so now let's call this function, and you're going to pass as a middleware. And remember, middleware is a function, like I said, that calls between your request and response. And to protect any route, right now we haven't finished the implementation or throw in error, but let's try it out. So to protect any route, to make sure that there's a token of the request the person is making, all what you need to do is to go to the route that you want to protect. So let's go to income route, and here let's require the off middleware package as that. There we go. So we have it here. So now these endpoints, we can protect them. So first, you need to provide, let's protect fetch all, this one. So it means that you place before the control. So it goes like this. When a person visits API users income, first of all, this function will run. If it passes, then this function will run. So if this function doesn't run, we're going to return. In JavaScript, if you return something, this function will never run. So with this, let's go to fetch all like this. And we see we have some error. So let's check it out and see. I think our import is wrong. Let's see. Cannot find JWT. Okay. Oh, sorry. It's JSON Web Token. I believe you guys saw it. It's called JSON Web Token. Like that. So let's try it out and see. Okay. We see that our middleware is hanging because we are not even use next to move on to next menu. But if you try, let's try the console, what we have. Is that the console? I'm going to have something weird. Okay. All right. It's because we are not even passing the token as a request here. But to try it out, let's go to off middleware here and let's console log something, because this function will not run. because there's no token here, and we're not even throwing any error, right? So I just want to make sure that this function is running. So let's send console.log, let's say token, to make sure that it's running. So our server is tired, it has hung up. Again, start working. You see, now we have token. So it means that our middleware is working. So now let's implement the actual logic. All right. So if there is token, then do that, right? But otherwise, if there's no token here we can throw an error and tell the user that not authorized here, not authorized, token expired. So you can name it token expired. So here, let's try again and look at the response. Check it out. There we go. You got it. Not authorized, token expired, because we didn't pass the token when you're making the request. So how can you pass a token to the request? So here it's pretty simple, like I said. So let's log in and grab the token. So let me log in here again and grab this token, copy it, and then let's go to the route that says that we need to log in, and here this one. So let's go to headers, authorization, and now Vera, let's paste our token, something or like this. Okay, so let's send. This time around again, token expired, not authorized, even though we pass in the token. Oh, sorry. So I think is it Vera token? No, headers, yeah, something like this one. Okay, so let's debug it while we are not getting the response. So not authorized. So here, let's try to console log the token here and see if we have the token. Indeed, if we have the token. Let's see. Let's try our luck. Okay, there we go. We have it here. Perfect. So next is, because this function always run. All right, so now we get a token. So now we have the token here. We can now call next here, right? Because if we get a token here, so inside our if here, if there is token, then we can call next here to move on to next middleware. So with this, I think this function will not even get here, but instead this will run. So let's see out. All right, it's giving us still message not authorized token. Okay, let's do this and see. Okay. Let's try again and try and see if it's working. Still not authorized, but we've passed the token. So it says that token expired. So let's check again the token. Oh, I got it. Did you see that? We didn't copy it well. We left the G. So let's copy that, the whole of the token, and then copy that, and then let's go to the endpoints, fetch all income, and then let's replace the actual token with the correct one, and let's send. And if you look at the console, you see that we have the verified one, the ID. So it means that this ID is a MongoDB ID, right? And expired, initiate at, and expired at. So now we have verified the token with the actual MongoDB user, right, ID. So now, if we want to fetch the actual user, now that we have the ID, we can use MongoDB method called find by ID to find this user. So let's go ahead and do that. So inside, let's remove that. So now that we have the ID, we can go ahead and then implement again, or start implementing. So here, if you find the user, now let's call next here. I believe I did this one, sorry, we are removing that. Okay, now next is being called. So now, if there is token, then let's call next. Otherwise, let's display this error. So let's try it out. You see, now because I called next means move on to next middleware. Cool. So now let's find the user, right? So find the user. The reason why I find the user is that in our request we can assign this user who is creating the post, right? So here comes, let's call this one user is equal to wait, we are going to MongoDB, and the user model we imported dot find by ID. Find by ID, and then the ID is from where? Decoded user, and let's check again the ID we got. It was, don't worry, we come out to that. The ID was, is it underscore or, let me check again, just ID, yeah, just ID. So dot ID. So now if you console log the user here, you're gonna get the user who is creating this post. So console log the user, and let's check it out. What this is, doesn't exist on the property string. Find by ID. Okay, check it out and let's see. There we go. You see, we have the user being fetched, right? So we have now decoded the user and get the token and get the user. So now we can add this user to the request object. So inside our controller, we can have access to this user and manipulate it whatever we want. So next is, let's go ahead and add this user to our request object. So now attach the user to the request object as that. So rec.user is now equal to our user, and that is it. We are done with it. So now let's remove all these console logs. We don't want you again. Okay, it has been removed already. So next, what about if the token expired? What about if there is no token? Then let's throw an error here inside the catch. Say that there is no token. There is no token attached to the header. Okay, so we are done with that. So if you remove, go to headers and let's remove the header. We're gonna get nice error message that there is no token attached to the header. But if there's header, there is token, but the token doesn't exist, let's get token not authorized, token expire. So now our implementation is working. But what I want to point out that now, because we attach the user inside that, in all our controllers, we have access to the user. So when you fetch all users here, instead of they're displaying the headers, let's get the user, rec.user, and let's see what we have. Rec.user, or let's check if there's rec and then user. So let's send it and let's check our console, and there we go. That is pretty awesome. We get it. Alright, so now that we have the user, we have now implemented authorization authentication. So here, let's go ahead and protect all the endpoint that we want to allow a user to log in first before. So let's go to income route here. First of all, we are protecting fetching all, but fetching all, I'm not sure that we need to protect. So let's remove that for testing. But when creating, right, should we, before you can fetch all income, yes, we need to log in first. And before you can find a single ID, log in first. Before you can update, log in first. Before you can delete, log in first. That is it. So the same thing applies to expenses, right? So let's go to expenses and also protect those routes. So let's bring in the off middleware. And the same process, I want to protect all of them. This one, create, and fetch, and fetch single, and update, and delete. Cool. So now everything is working as expected. So now if I go to the income route, and I try to create, and there's no token. It tells me not authorized. When I go to fetch all expenses, not authorized. Create, not authorized. So now our authorization is working perfectly. So next video, you go ahead and do what is called population. So assuming that if you fetch all expenses, you want to attach a user who created that expenses.